Now, as you heard, I used to work at a current affair, and I know it's not the highest quality TV program, but it's where I learned everything I needed to know about how not to do PR. You see, we had business owners, marketing managers, all kinds of angry and dodgy neighbours calling, wanting their story on air, but having no idea how to pitch a story to a busy journalist who has about 20 seconds to listen to them on the phone. And it was while I was at a current affair that I saw the power the media had to catapult a business to an entirely new level of success that they'd never, ever dreamt of. So a couple of years in, I thought, you know what? I think I can do this PR thing better than a lot of the other people I'm dealing with out there. And I started my own business, Wordstorm PR, and that was in the year 2000. And now we work with speakers, authors and experts, as well as all sorts of entrepreneurs and purpose-driven businesses to magnify their message in the media. And today I'm going to show you a little bit about how that works and how you can do it too. So before I do that, I'm just going to give you a quick difference between a quick lesson in media and how it all works. So there's two sides to the media and they're very separate. You've got the advertising side and the journalism side. Now, these two parts of the media cannot exist without each other. They coexist because no media outlet, whether it's a TV program, an online news site, radio show, will exist without the paying advertisers. So they need to be there. But put up your hand if you would tune into your favourite current affair program if it was just full of ads. I didn't think so. And that's where the journalists come in. Journalists are there to produce content that will add value to and engage their audience, to keep their audiences coming back for more, and to keep new audiences coming in, because guess what? When that happens, the advertisers can be charged more and they will attract new advertisers. And this is where the opportunity lies for you authors, experts and speakers. Because journalists are thirsty for content and you all have awesome stories and expertise to share. It's just about giving journalists what they need and how they need it. And the opportunity is there because 90% of what you watch, read and listen to in the media is PR driven, meaning it's stories that come either from authors and experts like yourself or from PR agencies like us. But how do you get cut through? Because journalists are receiving literally hundreds of pitches every single day. So how do you become that one that is the one that ends up with that amazing free, and I'm talking about the free exposure, not the advertising side. So this is where you need a hook, you need an angle. You need to layer a newsworthy hook layer your content over a newsworthy hook in order to speak to journalists in their language. And I'm going to share a few of those hooks that we use every day to get our clients, our ordinary non-celebrity clients, in mass media. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Ask the Expert. Now, this is where you have an opinion about your industry. What have you got to say about your industry? What's happening at the moment that you would like to comment on? And that opinion can also be controversial. Or perhaps some legislations come through in your industry and you can comment on how it's going to affect people out there as a whole, or your industry, or businesses within your industry. So what is your expert commentary within your field of expertise, so to say? Here's an example. So Chris Helder is a fantastic speaker. He's a global, amazing, award-winning speaker, and his whole topic is about useful belief, and he's actually launched a book last year called The Simple Shift. So during the pandemic in 2020, there was a thirst for thought leadership around mental well-being and mindset, and how to cope with the pandemic using your mindset. So we took him to the Today Show and pitched the idea that he can talk about his whole concept of useful belief and how it can help people. And here's his story now. how do I press play on that? Sorry, we can edit that. It
Of
worked.
course we
It
edit
worked
out.
before.
Yeah, now what do we want to get?
Which
Let me
button
just
did you
click
press?
off that. And
So
then
it's there.
there we go.
That's it.
Oh, welcome back. Think positive. It's a common phrase we're used to hearing at the moment, but one man thinks differently, saying it doesn't actually work.
Goodness me, author and motivational speaker Chris Felder joins us this morning to fire up the nation. Chris, it's an interesting concept. Why shouldn't we be positive? Why?
I know, it sounds crazy. It's a little counterintuitive, I guess. But the reality is the studies show this. The positive thinking doesn't work. And in the middle of this COVID craziness, everybody's being told to be positive. And the bottom line is positive thinking doesn't work. Instead, I'm talking about not positive thinking and negative thinking, which is emotional, but actually thinking about useful thinking, which is actually to go, what's the most useful thing for me to do today? Most useful thing for me to believe in.
See, I quite like that, because everyone does say positive, and I'm like, oh, go away. I'm like, I'm not in that sort of mood. What kind of thinking then, so it's useful thinking, but what does that actually mean?
All right, so useful thinking in simplest terms looks a little bit like this. We all have a reality, and I suppose within the context of that reality, right now, some people are really struggling with that reality, and there's a lot of things that we cannot control. So I do know some people that loved the COVID lockdown. They're like, I'm an introvert, I learned to play the piano, I speak Spanish now, I got a great relationship with my dog. You know, there's all these, but for a lot of other people right now, obviously there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of, there's a lot of things that lack of control. And so, bottom line, if you cannot control it or you cannot change it, well, there's no sense in trying to be positive and negative and be emotional about it. Ask yourself the question, what's the most useful thing for me to believe about this situation that I'm in? And for my good family and friends down in Melbourne, obviously they're in a tough spot at the moment. And just to be able to make sure you go and hang on, what's my most useful thing to do today? What's my most useful thing to believe about today?
Okay, so I'm getting the part where you said, there's some things you just can't control, so don't worry about those, don't try and control them. But what led you to this light bulb concept?
I know, I think I got really frustrated with the self-help industry, and that sounds funny because I'm a speaker, but the self-help industry, I think, is not actually giving people the best of advice in all these situations. And when we think about what's useful, what's not, we have a situation. If you're 70 years old right now, congratulations. Life begins at 70 years old. That's a useful belief. If you're 40, life begins at 40. That's a useful belief. And, we start thinking about this is the best time in the history of the world to be alive. And we open our brain up to beautiful things. And I know that's a tough sell right now in the middle of COVID, but this is the best time in the history of the world to have a global pandemic. I mean, with the hospitals and medication and what we can actually do for people. This is the best time in the history of the world to be alive. When you believe that, you walk outside and you see trees and flowers, puppies, and babies, and you find beautiful things in the world. If you believe, if you're single right now, this is the best time in the history of the world to be single. If you're single, if you're in a relationship, best time in the history of the world to be in a relationship. And it really is about creating your space and telling your story in a way that gives you power.
I don't know what you're doing, but I'm smiling.
Yeah,
You're
I can't
smiling
wait
again.
to take on the world.
I'm just smiling. So what tips, give us some tips, give us some things that we can actually do for those people who are struggling. I mean, I'm in Melbourne and we've been in like 100 years of lockdown, it feels like. So a lot of us are really struggling.
I think it really is making a simple shift to not getting down this rabbit hole of I feel this way today, or I feel that way today, but actually waking up in the morning and actually going, okay, here I am, this is my situation. What today would be useful with the family? What would be a useful way for me to spend my day around work? What would be a useful thing for me to do around health today? What would be a useful thing for me to do around some me time? And again, it is really just making a shift into useful and actually getting our brain going. And even in a business sense, it's what's income producing, what's not. Who's useful and who's not, by the way. Sometimes that 2020 is a year where everything's stopped. This is a year where we can get rid of toxic people, by the way. Let's start to think about who's useful in our life and who's not useful in our life. And who can we start to think about maybe eliminating from the flag?
So think useful thoughts and buy that book you've got behind you there. Simple shift. All will be well.
I gather that's out now, Chris.
Listen, Simple Shift is out now and available, obviously Audible as well. It's for those that like to listen. But it is, and obviously I'm a speaker, so like so many people who've required an audience this year, I've put useful belief to the test. I think I had 60 gigs lined up through Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, and I remember within 72 hours that went from 60 to 0. You know, like so many people, like comics and presenters, and you know, people that require an audience. And you know, I just want to say this as well, that the read is okay. Like I know a lot of people are doing it tough. Don't be hard on yourself. We are so mean to ourselves, and it's not useful. You know, we look at our phones every day, and our phones tell us that we're not enough, we can't be enough, we should be more. You know, and we listen to so many things that defeat us. To really start to think about what is useful in our life, what's income producing in our life, what's not, who's useful, and really start to think about letting that word guide you through your day.
Great stuff.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
Chris, Richard, I already feel more useful. Do
I
you?
just can't wait to
speaking
run around the block and be useful
just,
today.
you're going to be very useful. I like that guy, Chris. Thank you very much. It is.
So there you go, a 7-minute segment that Chris did not pay a cent to Channel 9 for, really explaining his thought leadership on useful belief. The next angle to speak to journalists in their language is top 5 tips. Media love tips, and in the lingo of media, they call it listicles. And the reason they love it is because people who consume the media can learn something very quickly while they're consuming the news on their phones, you know, while they're on the train or waiting for their child to finish their dance lesson, or some of us actually read our phones on the toilet. Not me, but some people do. And that is why journalists love tips. It's about providing fast value where people read and think, I feel better and I feel like I've learnt something. So an example of that is Karen Chaston, who has a business called Live Life by Design, and she, unfortunately, her son tragically passed away, and she now dedicates her life to helping people move on after grief. So one of the angles we worked on with her is 5 tips to actually move on after grief. And Body and Soul, which is a major supplement within every Sunday Telegraph and syndicated across all metro papers within Australia, published that story. So what tips can you give? Think about your subject and the 5 tips, myths or pitfalls that you have to share that will add value to others, because that's what it's all about. The next one is awareness days. There's an awareness day for just about every topic, every day, week and month of the year. Some are really well known, like International Women's Day actually goes on for a whole month of March, but others are far more obscure. Like, for instance, how many of you knew that on the 19th of November, it's World Toilet Day? And usually I have at least one hand going up when I say this in the audience. But if you're that toilet paper company who gives a crap, that social enterprise that some of you may have heard of, this would be their day. So here's an example of Sylvia Domiano. She's a leadership expert who's written a fantastic book as well. And we got her onto the TV talking about the importance of sleep for self-leadership during Sleep Awareness Week. Because when there's an awareness day, the media want to talk about what's going on in the world, and that's when they're focused on that sort of topic. Last but not least today, I'm going to share the last sort of angle, which is statistics. If you can put a stat and hang your story over that statistic, it instantly makes it appealing to journalists. So Tracy McMillan is a fantastic female lawyer with her own legal firm, Forge Legal, based in Brisbane. And she knew that 32% of Australians were self-representing themselves in court because they simply couldn't afford the legal fees. So she thought something has to be done about this and started a platform called No Lawyers, enabling separating couples to go there, negotiate custody and property assets, do it all through this platform, and when it was all negotiated, print, and a document would come out ready to take to the courts. But it was the statistic that we hung this story on that saw her with a feature story on a current affair, as well as news.com.au and many more that are rolling out. So I have devised the Magnify Me PR system for authors, speakers and experts, and it's made up of 2 sections. The first section is a one-day training with myself. It's called the Media Mindset Training Day, and the day is designed for you never to see media in the same light again. It's a very intensive and inspiring day where I work with you to really put you in the heads of a journalist and what they're thinking so that you can speak to them in their language. We then work on all your angles. We get your content and hang it over these newsworthy hooks, and these are just 3 examples of those, and come up with a whole annual calendar that you can be pitching to the media all year long. We then look at the audiences that you want to target and which media outlets you're going to target those particular audiences with. And I'm going to show you exactly how we write a pitch email that ends up in the sort of cut through that I've shown today. And then the second part of the day is media training. So that's when the journalist says, yes, I want to interview you. And I am training you to be confident to go and have that interview and know you're communicating the messages that you want to communicate. So we work on the key messages that you want to get across. And then I do a bit of role play, coming up with some light and fluffy questions and some more tricky questions. And after that training day, you have the option to buy monthly or bi-monthly pitching hours, whereby every month we check in. We come up with the best angle possible for what's going on in the world right now for that month, and then my team pitches it out and gets you some fantastic mass media exposure that's going to give you visibility, credibility, and help you boost your bottom line.